It's Sunday morning. I'm in my hoodie. It's time to get into the war room. And of course, I'm your host, Jeff Radcliffe, stumbling over my words here on Sunday morning, 11 a.m. on the East Coast for Pro Football Focus Fantasy. We're here doing start sit like we do every single week. Answered all your questions. With me this week, the incomparable Pat Thorman, and the Thunder from Down Under, Ross Miles, is in the house. We have a loaded crew. Mike Clay is going to be on ESPN Radio today, in case you're wondering where he is, so you can catch him there. I believe starting at 4 o'clock. Tune in, listen to Mike with all his great insights. But, Ross, what's going on today?
I've been out for a little while, catching some other sports as I get to do on a Sunday morning for me. It's Sunday afternoon here, so yeah, I'm just getting ready for some football. I'm going to get to enjoy Red Zone all afternoon because the Rams don't play till Monday night. That's made me take Tuesday morning off work, but it's all worth it to see us beat the Niners on Monday Night Football, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting game. I think that there is a good chance we could see a Rams win there. A sneaky defense play if you're really looking for some upside. I get a night game with my Eagles, but of course, Pat, you get a nice afternoon game with a division rival. Your Patriots facing the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. How you doing today, Pat?
I'm great. It's a first place matchup. This late in the season, a Pats Bills game for first place is kind of unusual. But 4 o'clock, you got Dallas and Seattle, which is a fascinating matchup. And then, like you mentioned tonight, that Eagles Giants game. That's the one I'm probably most looking forward to this weekend. There's a lot of fantasy goodness to be had in that one.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a fun one. As an Eagles fan, I'm a little nervous, I'll be honest. I just, something about it, the stars aren't aligning. I'm nervous about the offense. I'm nervous about how they're going to perform against this defense. The Giants' offense clicking on all cylinders. Really excited, though, regardless of the outcome. I'm excited to get into Week 6. But before we do, of course, the obligatory plug. If you're watching this on the YouTube feed, we greatly appreciate that, but if you want to get in on the action, you have to be a subscriber. The subscribers can come in and ask their questions live, on air, or in the group chat here. And if you want in on that, the only way to do so is to subscribe. Now, you could get that for $24.99, or if you haven't gotten down with the daily fantasy craze, all of us are in on this, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. Somebody won $1 million last week. They put a lineup in. They paid $27 for the lineup. They won $1 million. You got to get in on this stuff, and you can get in on it and get yourself some fantasy gold for free. All you have to do is head on over to DraftKings and use the promo code PFF. Deposit $10, $10, get you a 100% deposit bonus, and it gets you fantasy gold for free. You can't beat that, and you can get in on not only the Hangout, you can get in on our projections, our rankings, our content, and we have some crazy content. Pat puts out some of the most interesting analysis every week on the offensive side of the ball. Ross doing the same thing on the defensive side of the ball, and so much more for just $10. You can't beat that, and then heck, you get a shot at $1 million every week playing in these contests. It's just outrageous. All right, so let's get into some of the questions. And actually, Ross, we'll kick things off. I got a question on Twitter. Remember, if you're on Twitter, you're watching this on the YouTube feed, and you're not getting in the live chat, we're still checking our Twitter feeds, so you can just use the hashtag War Room, and we'll get to your question. And Ross, this is an interesting question, something we sort of touched on in our show this week, our podcast. Jonathan Cyprien or Barry Church for the rest of the season? I think that's a really intriguing question because obviously Church is on the decline. Better linebacker play there in Dallas, has led to less tackle opportunities. Cyprien on the rise, and we saw a double-digit tackle performance out of him last week. So where are you going with that one? Church or Cyprien rest of the season?
I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago I would have said Church, but right now I'm going to say Cyprien. We discussed on Friday just how Church's play has declined. We've seen a change in the way he's being used on the field. Some of the stats I've been delving into are what percentage of snaps, run snaps, these safeties are playing in the box, giving them a greater chance to get to the ball carrier. And Church's usage has dropped from 45% last year to 24% this year, which is really hampering his ability to, get the tackles he was seeing at the end of last season. So as you say, Church is on the Cyprien's on the rise, and he's the guy I'm going to pump with on that one. It is close, but I think Cyprien's the the bus I'm riding there.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. Church is trending downward. You know, it's a somewhat good matchup for a tackle producer, but it's not a good matchup for a defensive back this week either against Seattle. So I'm not really crazy about him here. I'm not really crazy about him going forward. Now let's talk about some offense, though, because of course that's what everybody wants to know. There's only the 2%ers in the IDP leagues. And this is an interesting question to kick things off here. We got Patrick on Twitter asks, and I'm assuming only one here, if you have your choice in a half-point PPR, Pat, we have our choice between Larry Fitzgerald, Torrey Smith, Eric Decker, and Brian Quick. So a bunch of names kind of jumbled up back there in the rankings. Who are you going with if you're picking one between Fitzgerald, Torrey Smith, Decker, and Quick?
I would probably quickly eliminate Fitch just because of the uncertainty with Palmer, and it looks like he's going to play, but it just kind of, there's a lot of unknown there. There's a couple of good other options. I think this is the week for Torrey Smith, but we still kind of need to see it. We've been disappointed quite a bit, and Denver's good against number one receivers. So I'm gonna keep with Quick. I mean, he's a huge part of their offense. He went off last week. I know San Francisco is not Philly as far as the defense, but I'm gonna keep going with Quick.
Ross, thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's almost unthinkable. I can't believe I'm going to sit here and say Brian Quick as well. I mean, a year ago, this isn't, we couldn't even consider Brian Quick in this kind of conversation a year ago. Like you say, I think there's question marks over all of the other guys. Quick is the only one in a secure role in the offense right now. Kenny Britt looked a little bit dinged up earlier in the week, so he is questionable, I believe, for today. Monday night. So I think Quick's a lock for that one.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree with you. It's strange enough to think, but you got to like the targets. You got to like the fact that Austin Davis is not really afraid to sling that rock. He keeps punching, and you have to like that. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Quick there as well. They're all really close in my rankings this week, but I have Quick at the top. Now, we have a few folks in the chat, which is great to see. We're going to hit these questions up, guys. So we're going to start with Kyle. He says top of the morning to us. I don't know if that's is it an Irish thing, Ross?
Irish. Top of the morning to you.
There you go. So we got the Irish going on. Ross is British, not Australian, not Irish, not Welsh. Anyway, he's asking non-PPR. Got Wes Welker, Michael Floyd, and Keenan Allen. So again, some players who are kind of jumbled together. You got Welker seeing targets. I mean, Welker's effect on this team is just massive, though, because hey, Demaryius Thomas, he went off because Welker was back. He said he didn't have to play the slot anymore. He wasn't worried because he was uncomfortable in the slot, and he wasn't worried that Peyton was going to get mad at him. So Welker seeing targets. Michael Floyd with Carson Palmer in. And then Keenan Allen, of course, we've seen sort of Jekyll and Hyde performances out of Keenan Allen so far this season. So who are you going with there in a non-PPR, Pat?
I'm going to definitely go with Keenan Allen. With Malcolm Floyd being questionable, I'm not sure if he's going to play. You figure Allen's going to get some more targets. Oakland doesn't really present too tough of an opponent from the passing game. But between Welker and Floyd, I think it's Michael Floyd. I think it's going to probably depend on what you think of your matchup. If you need that home run, I would probably go with Michael Floyd. Palmer is back. We should see a little more success with Floyd. Welker is going to give you a pretty safe floor. I'm not sure if he's going to be scoring touchdowns at the rate he scored last year. That was kind of flukish. So for upside, go Floyd. For safe floor, go Welker, and definitely go Allen.
Yeah, thoughts on that, Pat? Or Ross, that is. I agree with Pat on this.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm more of a gambler when it comes to fantasy and my wide receivers. I like going for the home run hits, so that means I'm going to have to leave Welker on the bench. I did have Allen a lot higher in my rankings recently. I mean, had him on the cusp of wide receiver one and Floyd as well. So those guys can perform like that. Obviously, they've got injury issues of their own and maybe a quarterback issue as well in Arizona. So, but still, I think these are the guys to go with.
Yeah, it's intriguing, though. If you look at the rankings, we all agree that it's Allen, but then if you look to Mike, Mike's probably the only one who looks like he's off Allen this week. He has Allen ranked as number 39 receiver. According to Mike, you go Welker here. So if you're kind of, again, if you're looking for that higher floor play, yeah, sure, Welker's going to see those targets, but ultimately, I think how you don't start Keenan Allen in this spot. Let's head over to George's question, and George says Harrison Smith is questionable to play. Are you going with him, Ross, or are you going to kind of go the safe route and play somebody like Ishmael? He also lists Merriweather. I'm not crazy about Merriweather's matchup. I'm not crazy about Merriweather in general, but I'm not crazy about the matchup, so I'm going to fade him. But would you start Ishmael?
No, I think for me, as long as we, keep it, on the internet right now, we've got only an hour till we get like the final injury reports. You can get inactive pretty readily at this time. I would say as long as Smith is on the field, you have to play him. I'm not saying Ishmael's a bad play, but we're talking Harrison Smith, Jeff and me, Jeff, I, and Nate. We've all got him ranked to the top 3 or 4 right now for this week. So I think you have to play him as long as he's on the field.
I mean, I don't mean to avoid you on these. I'm gonna have to mute whoever this is here. Is that Dave? You're coming through on our show with some background noise, but I don't mean to avoid you on these IDP questions, Pat. If you have any thoughts,
no, I implicitly trust your judgment on this. This is, there's no question that you guys are the experts.
All right, let's take a look at Austin's question, because Austin bringing up a player who I've seen a lot of questions about so far on Twitter this week, and that's Joique Bell. Now, as a flex player, you're going to go with Joique Bell or Lamar Miller in a standard league. Lamar Miller, obviously, with no Sean Moreno back in the mix, isn't going to get the workload that we saw before their bye, but he didn't really get a lot of touches anyway, and he didn't really need a lot of touches to be successful. So, background noise is killing me. Whoever that is, I might have to boot you. Back to Joique Bell, Lamar Miller. Pat, who are you starting out of those two?
Oh, I'm going to go with Bell just because I'm more confident in his workload. Love Miller's matchup. Green Bay really has a tough time stopping the run, but it came out this morning. It looks like Marino's going to get 8 to 10 carries, and that's really going to cut down on Miller's upside. Bell's going to probably get a more full load. His matchup isn't bad either against Minnesota. So as much as I do like Lamar Miller and his matchup, I'm going to go with Bell.
What about you, Ross?
It's a really interesting one for me. I've got them very close to my rankings. I've got Bell marginally above Miller. I've got Bell 15, Miller 18. Both of them are sort of waiting on more news. Well, with Marino, we know he is going to see some time. We're just not sure how much. With Reggie Bush, then there's an even bigger question mark. We don't even know if he's going to see any time. I think if Bush is out, you go for Bell. If Bush is playing, I think I'd actually take Miller. I'm a really big Miller fan. I think he's a bit of a home run hitter.
It does sound like Bush is going to sit. Ian Rappaport tweeted out about an hour ago that Bush is expected to miss the game. So that means a lot of carries for Joique Bell here. We've seen what he can do as that true bell cow. And, there's so many puns here. He's going to get the lion's share. He's the bell cow. But either way, I do like him. I like him as a daily play this week because he's coming in so cheap in pretty much every daily site. But I'm going to go Bell here as well, and it really does look like Bush is going to sit. Also coming across the wire here as we're getting more questions, Cam Chancellor, I've gotten a few questions about Cam Chancellor so far this morning. He's going to be a game-time decision. I really don't like the sound of this because really that's a great matchup against Dallas, but you don't like when you see a player like Chancellor who hasn't been able to get in practice the entire week, and then you're hearing game time decision. I don't know if they necessarily really need to trot him out there, so there's a really good chance that he may not play. If you're in that situation, I really would make sure you have a backup plan of some sort, some player who's going in a later game, because you could be really stuck with Chancellor. Sounds like he's not going to play, but we'll update you if there's any other news on that. Heading back over to Twitter, getting a bunch of questions here. This one's an interesting one. In a potentially high-scoring game, we have Roddy White, who has disappointed for most of the season, but it's a completely different Atlanta team at home, or Kelvin Benjamin. Now, Pat, who are you going with there? And it's a non-PPR, so you're starting Roddy White or Kelvin Benjamin?
Non-PPR makes it a little closer. I'm still going to go with Roddy White. He's got the better corner matchup. Benjamin's going to be a little more inconsistent. Matt Ryan at home, it's going to be a high-scoring game, like you mentioned. I think Roddy's the safer play, especially in PPR, but even in standard.
Did I?
Did you?
No, I was going to say I'm with Pat. I think Roddy White's the play there. It is close. I mean, Benjamin's performed a lot higher than I think many of us expected early season in a career for a player that's so raw. But the safety of Roddy White, I think, is the way you got to go this time.
Yeah, I agree. Going Roddy White there. Pat, it sounded like your audio cut out for a second. That's where I was. We're having nothing but
Before we
fun.
Jeff, this is come on. We're all agreeing with everything. Can someone show us some tougher questions? Make us argue a little bit. We can't all just be consensus answers all the time. Don't let me say something.
No, I disagree.
Hey.
And by the way, too, Austin, I'm not skipping your question here. He has another question about tight ends, so let's do that one real quick while Austin's still hanging out with us here. Asking Jordan Cameron or Larry Donnell in a standard league. Again, another situation that can be a little tricky. Cameron has disappointed so far this season, but could be 1 week healthier, hopefully, and facing the Steelers again. Whereas we have Donnell facing a really banged up defense for the Eagles tonight. Could see a lot of targets against them. So who are you going with, Cameron or Donnell? Pat.
I am actually going to go with Cameron on this. I think the Giants just have a number of red zone options now. Even Beckham caught a red zone touchdown last week. And they seem to be going to have the better matchups on the outside with Randall and Beckham. Although Donnell's a fine option, but I mean Cameron looked good against the Steelers week 1. Before his shoulder kind of took its toll, and I think that game's going to be a sneaky offensive game. Both teams run a lot of no huddle. They had a big scoring game the first week, so it's close. I think I have them very close in my rankings, but in standard, I'm going to go with Cameron.
How about you, Ross?
Yeah, I've gotten close as well, but I think Eli Manning to tight ends has been an underrated partnership throughout his career. I mean, if you think about what the kind of production he put up with Jeremy Shockey, so this is the first time he's had a really decent one in a while. Obviously, they didn't quite use Martellus Bennett as well as they should have, perhaps, but I'm going to say Donald because that guy's a beast. I think Eli looks for him in the red zone. I know Pat's saying there's other options there, but I think this is Eli's first read in some of those crucial third down situations.
Yeah, breaking the tie here, I do think they go to him a lot. I mean, the Eagles have been relatively good against tight ends so far this season. They've only let up 1 touchdown to the position. But, again, I'm just really concerned about Michael Kendrick's not playing. D'Amico Ryan's banged up in practice this week. And the safety situation has never really been that solid in Philly. So this could be a game where we see another strong one from Donnell. I'm leaning Donnell here. But while we're on the subject of tight ends, I got an interesting one with the hashtag War Room on Twitter from somebody named Surgery. And he's got Jimmy Graham on bye, and I hate to break it to you, but you got Jimmy Graham missing probably a couple more weeks after the bye. And he wants a sneaky tight end play. Now, he brings up Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He brings up Niles Paul, which is an interesting play. Charles Clay, I mean, disappointing a little bit so far this season. But do you guys have any tricks up your sleeve, any tight ends, maybe deeper guys who will be available on pretty much any waiver wire, who you like to play in Week 6? And I'll toss that to you first, Pat.
Luke Wilson, Double L Wilson from Seattle. He's got the Cowboys, and I don't think Dallas is going to be able to completely hog the ball again. So I think Seattle's going to be able to run a few more plays than most of Dallas's opponents, and they're awful against tight ends. The Cowboys are. So he's kind of a sneaky play, especially ASJ. The rest of these guys, Paul and ASJ, are kind of dart throws as well. So for a sneaky play, I would go with Luke Double L Wilson.
And I do like that play a lot, given the fact as well that the Cowboys are the number 1 matchup for tight ends so far this season. They've given up at least a touchdown in 4 of 5 games so far. They gave up 2 touchdowns in Week 1, 2 touchdowns in Week 4. So, I mean, the position has just been dominating. Now, last week we didn't really see anything out of the position. That's because there's really no tight ends to be had in Houston. But that's a really intriguing play. This guy's going to be available in most any league, and you could scoop him up. Just a plug and play. He's a streamer. That's all he is. But you get 1 week out of him. You pat him on the back and send him back to the bench, send him back to free agency, and move on. And you get your W. Ross, do you have any deeper tight ends this week that you find intriguing besides Wilson?
I wouldn't say deep. I mean, I'm going to go a little bit shallower actually. I mean, the guys you mentioned are the guys I'd probably be interested. Wilson and ASJ. But Jared Cook, if he's the kind of guy that you kind of think about, but he always hangs around the waiver wire. He's getting plenty of targets in this Rams offense. He's dropped a touchdown this year. He definitely should have caught. He's had a few other. He's targeted on some decent routes. He's one of those safer bets for the Rams receiving core other than Quick. So if he's there, he could be a player as well.
That's what Jared Cook does. He drops touchdown passes. All Chris Carter does is catch touchdown passes. All Jared Cook does is drop touchdown passes. But I do agree, 5,200 on FanDuel this week. That's the play if you're looking to save some bucks and you're looking for a guy who isn't used a lot. If in your GPPs, absolutely love the Jared Cook play this week and do have him in a lineup or two. So that's a good call, and people get fed up with players, they drop them, and you can scoop them up and get in there and get your points. All right, we have a question from Brad. Brad's asking flex half-point PPR, Lamar Miller again, Michael Floyd, or Ruben Randall. Now this is interesting because again we've highlighted a little bit of what what we think about Floyd today, especially with Palmer back, with Miller, with Moreno back. Randall, we really haven't talked about much, and I know we're all sort of salivating at the prospects of the points that he had in this Sunday night contest. And let's face it, and this is something I talked about in one of my columns this week, outside receivers on the Giants have historically, recent history, have torched the Eagles. Going back to last season, Hakeem Nicks in Week 5 he had 9 catches, 100 and whatever, 40-some yards. And just absolutely lit him up. He looked like the Hakeem Nicks of old, and then he quickly went back to the Hakeem Nicks we know and sometimes love now. But Ruben Randall, a really intriguing play. Pat, what are your thoughts on this one? Michael Floyd, Ruben Randall, or Lamar Miller?
Well, the home run play is certainly Ruben Randall. I think Floyd you kind of want to avoid because his floor is lower than the other two. I think Lamar Miller is the safer play. His ceiling is capped, like we spoke about, with because Marino is going to get some touches. But he's got a solid floor. Randall is certainly the home run play. So if that's what you're looking for, and most fantasy owners are, go for Randall. Whether he gets Kyrie Williams or Bradley Fletcher, he's going to have the advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. He's and again, I think he's really starting to get it in this offense. The Mike Clay offense. Is really and if you don't get that, just look at Ben McAdoo and look at Mike Clay, and you possibly what we're talking about. Eerily similar. It's kind of like the doppelganger of Mike Clay. But Ross, do you agree with Pat's take here? Are you going Lamar Miller though, or are you gonna kind of try and hit that home run with Ruben Randall?
Now I'm going to play Miller because when it comes to these kind of ones, when you're talking about wide receiver 3-4s against running back 2s, I prefer to play the safer choice just because I want that kind of grounding, and I do think Miller's got enough upside in him even with Marino back. So I'm going to say play Miller here.
Interesting. So we do have a little bit of a disagreement, and I'm leaning Randall just because I really like the matchup. I like the fact that the Giants just kind of torched the Eagles on the outside there. So for me, it's Randall, and yes, it is more of a home run swing for the fences, but I think he has the best chance to put up the most points this week out of that bunch. So if you're hanging out in the Hangout itself here and you want to get a question in, you can, of course, ask on the chat, or if your mic actually works, you could come on and ask it live with us. But let's head back on over to Twitter. Remember, if you're watching this on the YouTube feed, you can hit us up on Twitter. Just use that hashtag WarRoom, and we'll do our best to get to all of the questions we're seeing there. And the questions are coming in fast and furious. A lot of Michael Floyd, and I have a feeling that the Carson Palmer news, a lot of folks have been sitting on Floyd and didn't know exactly how to handle this, especially with the potential of seeing Logan Thomas in there. But this one's interesting. Are you starting Floyd over Michael Crabtree? And being that Pat, you're sort of the resident Michael Floyd guy, what are your thoughts here? Are you starting him over Michael Crabtree?
Yeah, it's been a tough road as the Michael Floyd guy through the first month of the season. But I would actually, because you're kind of dealing with injury situations with both of them. I mean, Crabtree's been hampered with his foot, whether he admits it or not. And Bolden looks like probably a better play this week in San Francisco. And Floyd gets Palmer back. I mean, if you're going to use Floyd, and you are chomping at the bit, and if he does go off today and you have him on your bench, you kick yourself. So it's close enough that I would swing for Floyd in this one.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Ross, Crabtree, and Floyd?
I'd play Floyd as well, actually. Yeah, obviously, as Pat's pointed out, they're both dealing with some sort of injuries of their own sorts. I'm just not a Kaepernick fan when it comes to the passing game. I don't think he utilises Crabtree in a role to go deep. That's not the way that offense really plays. So yeah, I'd play Floyd. I think he's got a chance of hitting a bigger play. Even when he was injured a few weeks ago, he hit that 50-yarder with that nice catch down the sideline. So
yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. And actually, another issue that has been, and I've been seeing it across the entire week, is in Denver. Okay, we obviously have a running back situation of brewing. We have Ronnie Hillman in there as the quote-unquote starter, pegged for 50 to 55% of the touches. Then we also have C.J. Anderson in there, and this one is really a head scratcher for me because every time I see Hillman, he just does not impress me, and every time I see Anderson, he does impress me. By the way, last week, if you were wondering why we didn't see Anderson on the active roster, it was really because they wanted an extra D-back in the lineup, and that's why Anderson wasn't active. So it had nothing to do with really anything other than they just wanted to stack their defense backs. They ran a nickel defense, the Broncos, pretty much the entire game. So, Pat, what are your thoughts? I mean, let's say you had to decide between Anderson and Hillman, what direction are you going with in that one?
For today, I would go Hillman. Indications are that he's going to start. He would probably get at least to start. The majority of the workload. And against the Jets, I think you probably have more success with a quicker guy, maybe catch a few more passes. The linebackers aren't good in coverage in New York versus more of a power option because that defensive line, as we all know, is pretty stout no matter what it kind of looked like last week in that debacle in San Diego. So for this week alone, and like yourself, I'm kind of baffled about how this is going to go in the long run. But for this week, I would go with Hillman.
Going Hillman. Ross, you going Hillman? You going to roll the dice with CJ?
No, I'm going to say consensus agreement there as well from me. No matter what, until we see it, you can't plug Anderson in, I don't think, no matter what we're hearing from beat writers and people watching practices. I mean, how long did we all know? Everyone knew Jamal Charles was a better bet than Thomas Jones in that double-headed monster in Kansas, but it took seasons for Jamal Charles to become the number one back. So, I don't expect this to change overnight. I'm going to go with Hillman for the time being.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. I actually have been sitting on Anderson in a bunch of leagues pretty much all season, especially given the fact that Monte Ball has really been sort of unimpressive so far. I'm glad I don't have to make this decision. I mean, obviously you do have to lean Hillman given the news that he's going to be the guy, but at least we think. But I would not be shocked if we look at that box score from that Jets game. First of all, we see Demaryius Thomas go over 200 yards, but if Anderson had the better numbers, it really wouldn't shock me in the least bit. So it's a tough dilemma, but yeah, you do have to lean Hillman if you're going in that direction this week. All right, Chris is with us. Chris been here a couple hangouts in a row with us here, and he's got a question about what's going on with Garrett Graham. Generally unimpressive. Numbers from Garrett Graham, and essentially what's going on. I mean, my quick take is the guy really isn't a receiving option, and it's an offense that isn't emphasizing the tight end right now. But Pat, have you been able to pay close attention to what you're doing with Graham and why the numbers are unimpressive?
Well, it has been disappointing. He's a guy that, in the offseason I kind of thought had a chance to pop, especially with, the Bill O'Brien offense has historically been tight end friendly. He got off to the slow start with an injury, but, he's been healthy for, a few weeks now. And even in last week against Dallas, he wasn't really doing very much in a favorable matchup. So, he's a guy that you kind of start to lose a little bit of hope for. The offense obviously runs through Foster. They're going to just use him as much as possible, and they're not going to. I mean, Graham is no more than the third option beyond that. At fourth option if you include Foster. So it's tough to kind of hold on to him. There are other options in that range that are probably on your waiver wire.
Yeah, absolutely. Other options that we've already covered so far today, Austin Seferian-Jenkins is somebody who I expect his targets to continually increase. I mean, the fact of the matter is he's on the field and not coming off the field, and so he can do everything that they want him to do. And boy, if you watch back to some of his tape from college, you'll see there's an ability there and certainly a high ceiling. With Seferian-Jenkins, if you need this week, of course, we talked about Luke Wilson as that guy who we're probably plugging and playing if somebody like Jared Cook is already scooped up. So yeah, in that kind of situation, I do agree with the take that he is kind of worthless. Unfortunately, I'll agree with that. From a fantasy standpoint, he is kind of worthless. But we got another question on Twitter. Remember, if you are watching this on the YouTube, hashtag War Room, and we'll get to your questions. And it's from the Fantasy Money Man, our buddy Matt on Twitter here. He needs a shot in the dark. I guess he needs a big upside swing for the fences play. And he's got Andre Holmes, he's got Devontae Adams, he's got Tavon Austin, Corey Fuller, or Jarvis Landry. So he's got a whole gaggle of wide receivers there. But right off the bat, I'm going to actually take the lead on this one. For me, I'm going Devontae Adams. In fact, he's a player who I like in daily leagues in GPPs this week because of the fact that Aaron Rodgers came out and said, hey, this guy's getting open, and I need to see this when I'm on the field. And now that he watched that tape, he saw Adams getting open. Yeah, he slipped on a couple plays, that's fine, but he saw him getting open, and he's going to be looking his way more frequently because in his mind now he's saying, hey, this guy's getting open. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the coming out week. I mean, we've already seen Adams catch a touchdown. It got called back, unfortunately, but I think this could be a coming out week for Adams. If you're swinging for the fences of that bunch, go with the guy who has the best quarterback, and that, of course, is Adams. Pat, do you have thoughts on that one? I'll run through this list of players again. It's a laundry list. Andre Holmes, Devontae Adams, Tavon Austin, Corey Fuller, or Jarvis Landry.
Well, the last three I would eliminate pretty quickly. So it would come down to between Holmes and Devontae for me. And I agree. I would go with Devontae. I mean, the tight end is not incorporated into that offense. They don't throw a heck of a lot of passes to the running backs. So I mean, you're looking at the third man in Aaron Rodgers' offense, and the Dolphins have let up a heck of a lot of plays to opponents. This game had a sneaky shootout potential. So and that pass defense is rated higher than their rush defense. I'm talking about Miami, but they have not been tested very much yet. This is going to be by far their biggest test. So I agree. I think Adams might be busting out this weekend. Like you said, he's 3,000 on DraftKings, which is a pretty nice shot in the dark for GPP.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Ross, are you leaning Tavon here? I don't know. Are you gonna hang tight to your Rams, or do you think, like we do, that this might be a week where you want to swing for the fences with Adams?
Hell no, am I putting Tavon in any starting lineups? No. I may be a Rams fan, but I'm not a blind Rams fan. I'll put it that way. I'm definitely going to go with Devontae Adams as well. I spent a bit of time doing some tape study of college guys in the preseason, and Devontae Adams was one of the guys I watched quite a lot of, being the fact he scored so many touchdowns. He didn't have the biggest route tree in his arsenal, but it's really interesting to see that he's already earned some time in the field in that Packers offense. This is all really encouraging, especially as Jeff said, Aaron Rodgers has called him out in a positive way. So I like Adams. If you've got him in dynasty leagues, you might have found a decent one.
Yeah, he certainly did stand out, and let's not forget too what the Packers did in this draft. I mean, obviously Adams was their the receiver with the brightest future, at least in the short term. But they also drafted Jeff Janis. Sorry, getting feedback again here. Let me see here. You're coming from you, Ross.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out what's happened there.
Ross has his computer is taking over here. But they drafted Jeff Janis, an athletic freak, a small school player who we really haven't seen much of. He's played 12 snaps so far this season, but a high ceiling. And then, of course, Jared Abbrederis, who came in with a history of concussions. You know, you never like to see that. But also then he tore his ACL, so he's out. But they just keep loading up on these receivers for Rodgers, which is great to see. I mean, we're going to continue to see Rodgers be, stockpiled and hopefully showing off his abilities for years to come here. We got an IDP question from Jim in the chat here. He's asking on defensive linemen, Ziggy Ansah, Cam Wake, or Everson Griffin in a sack-heavy league. And while you may not want to necessarily start Cam Wake against Aaron Rodgers does take sacks, so I'm actually going to lean in that direction. I've gotten questions from IDP owners, what's going on with Cam Wake this season? Nothing. Watch the games, folks. He's awesome. He's just not putting up numbers yet, but Cameron Wake, Robert Quinn, Jason Pierre-Paul, so far this season. So get them in your lineups. Darn you, Roto World. Roto World has ads that apparently just start playing at random times.
So does NFL Network. That's why I was getting done earlier.
Yeah, unfortunately my Roto World feed has to get clicked off for a second. But anyway, you're starting these guys. You're starting Cam Wake every week. Yes, I like Ziggy Ansah. I like Everson Griffin. But this is pretty no-brainer for me. What about you, Ross?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. I'm going to definitely keep it quick and say Cameron Wake. But I want to ask a follow-up question because, you were talking about Aaron Rodgers and the weapons put around him. From a dynasty perspective, do you think Rodgers is the number one quarterback right now? Give me your top three because Andrew Luck is a beast and he's got plenty of weapons. And I think there's a good argument that Andrew Luck's the number one dynasty quarterback right now. Just wanted to hear what you guys think.
Just real quick, from my perspective, with most dynasty leagues starting one quarterback, I'm not. I look at it a shorter time frame than say 8 to 10 years. I think Rodgers will still be more productive than Luck over the next handful of years, and so I still favor him. But like you said, I mean, Luck is right behind him.
Yeah, Luck is certainly playing absolutely out of his mind right now. Just the poise. He's got elements of so many different players in his game. He's got the gunslinger mentality of Brett Favre. He's got the poise in the pocket of Joe Montana. I mean, so many different things, but yet he's such his own unique type of player. But Rodgers is Rodgers, and sometimes Rodgers makes this stuff look like a video game. So I'm going to lean Rodgers there as the number one guy. And I agree with Pat. Far too many times do I see people playing in dynasty leagues where they're playing for 5 years from now, and 5 years from now may never happen, right? We can't predict this future because, like I always say, if any one of us could accurately predict the future, we would not be doing this show right now. I'd be sitting on an island that I own with Kanye West. Okay, that's just how it goes. But yeah, you got to play for this year. You got to win championships now. You can't win them in 5 years. It may never happen. So I'm going to agree, but hey, Luck has certainly skyrocketed up the rankings here. Interesting question. Carolina, okay, last week we're thinking, all right, it's going to be Darren Reeves, maybe a dash of Fozzie Whitaker. Then all of a sudden news breaks, it's going to be Fozzie Whitaker with a dash of Darren Reeves, and Chris Obanaya scores the touchdown. So what are we doing this week? Who's going to get the touches, Pat? Are you even touching this game?
I'm going to avoid it if at all possible. Yeah, and it just, even Reeves is banged up a little bit this week. I guess I would go with Obanaya and hope for a goal line touchdown. But if you have any other avenues to go, I would highly recommend going there.
Yeah, it's okay. So Chris actually has a choice between Reeves or Antoine Smith. And the Smith play is really interesting because the guy just keeps scoring touchdowns. But it's also interesting because Mike Smith has said we got to get this guy more touches. He's just dynamic. That touchdown run last week was just so impressive. The balance that he showed to break that tackle, and then the acceleration. I mean, you're talking. This guy has world-class track acceleration where he gets to top speed so quickly. And I mean, the foot frequency and everything. Although who was chasing him down? Was that Cromartie? Who was that? I forget who it was who was chasing him down on the one play, and I'm like, whoa, whoever the defensive back was actually gaining on Smith for as fast as Smith is. But are you going Smith over Reeves here, Pat?
Yeah, I probably would. I mean, both backfields are kind of a mess of choices, and I think I want a guy with the big play potential, and in a game that has a high over under, there's going to be a lot of points scored.
Absolutely. Thoughts on this, Ross?
Firstly, I'm a little bit disappointed, Jeff, that when you buy an island, the first person you're going to invite is Kanye West. What have I ever done? I mean, we've actually hung out. You've never met Kanye West. But anyway, disappointment. On Tom Smith. When you're rolling with players that far down, and you're looking at like RB5s, RB6s, I know you've got to go with the home run hitter. I mean, it sounds like we're echoing the same thoughts for most of these picks, but I'd rather have 2 points versus 3 points, or the guy that can possibly get like 10 because he scores a big touchdown. Go with Smith.
Yep, I agree. I'm gonna have to go Smith there. Reeves was really unimpressive. Just didn't see much out of this guy to really like, and not much out of that offense in general. We've been highlighting offensive line play, and on both sides, both tackles have been poor. Byron Bell and Nate Chandler have been just poor options on either side, which certainly bodes positively if you got any piece of that Cincinnati defense this week. Gotta like Cincinnati at home on top of it. This is just, it has the makings of a really potentially bad game for the Panthers. And I'm trying to avoid pretty much most of that Panthers offense this week if I can. All right, let's head back over to Twitter. Remember, hashtag War Room if you have any questions for us.
Just Jeff, just one interesting note. Calvin is definitely out. Reggie Bush is out, and Terrence West of the Browns is inactive. So, you give Crowell a little bump, and that's nice for Tate. I mean, Tate is pretty cheap and daily as well. He's got a good matchup, and he's got one less guy hanging over his shoulder today.
Yeah, and if you're going to play Tate, make sure that's only in cash games. He was pretty widely played in FanDuel on Thursday night. Absolutely love the workload that he could potentially get in this game. Maybe a little dash of Crowell gets me excited. All right, so as the news comes in, guys, of course, feel free to pop in at any time and just talk over me. Anyway, we have Noshawn Moreno, Cordero Patterson, Storm Johnson, Stephen Ridley, or Justin Hunter in a half-point PPR. So we have a bunch of choices there. Some higher floor, some higher ceiling. Go through them again. Noshawn Moreno, Cordero Patterson, Storm Johnson, Stephen Ridley, or Justin Hunter. Pat, who are you going with?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a Ridley day in Buffalo. I think the interior is going to have a heck of a time against that Bills defensive line. I think it's a Vereen day. So I'll eliminate him. Patterson we need to see before we can really confidently go with him. Moreno's going to have a cap ceiling with his touches. I think Storm Johnson is a sneaky play in not such a bad matchup, and it looks like he's going to be kind of the lead guy for them. So between him and Hunter, I think Johnson's probably the safer play. Hunter is more the upside play. I guess that's the way you'd want to approach it. Personally, I would probably go with Hunter just because I like to take a few more chances, and it's PPR. So, but don't ignore Storm Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't ignore him at all. And we finally get a glimpse of him. Ross, I don't know if you had a chance to look at this guy in the preseason when you were studying the college players, but I certainly got a chance to look at him. And it was kind of inadvertent at first because I was watching Bortles, and this guy just kept showing up on tape. And it's like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And you have to love the name just on top of it. I mean, that sounds like a football player right there. But they have the mind meld. The Bortles-Johnson mind meld. Could work well, potentially in a couple extra receptions here or there. They know how to play with each other on the same team, and gotta like that play. I'm going Storm Johnson there. I do like Storm. I can see why you would go Justin Hunter, but I'm going Storm Johnson. Ross, break the tie.
It boils down to three players for me, the ones we will focus on: Patterson, Hunter, and Storm Johnson. I am going to go with Hunter. I haven't managed to get him right yet this season. He's one of the guys I really thought was going to be a breakout player. I managed to drop him last week, and obviously he went off and got 99 yards and 1 touchdown. So I'm going to return to putting him in my lineups this week. Hunter's the guy for me.
All right, so we're going Justin Hunter as the consensus with that one. Got a question about Bishop Sankey, and obviously a lot of talk here about Sankey this week. Would you sit Andre Ellington or Joik Bell for Bishop Sankey?
Not Joik Bell. Ellington's a little bit closer, but I would probably still go with Ellington. He's going to get a pretty good workload, whether it's Palmer, whether he can go or not. And Washington's run defense kind of was boosted with some early season blowouts. They're not quite as good as their ranking shows. So Ellington's going to get a big workload. Bell's going to get a big workload. But and we got to wait and see with Sankey if you have better options.
Ross, are you going to roll the dice on him, or are you sticking with Joik Bell and Andre Ellington?
I'm not plugging him in. I haven't been a Sankey fan pre-season, all season, and even now. Yes, he's going to have touches, but I'm just not his biggest fan. I'm definitely going with the other two.
Couple players coming through as active. Cecil Shorts will be active, so maybe we should talk about him. And then also, just real quick before we touch on him, Joe Hayden's going to be active. He's going to be against Antonio Brown, but let's face it, Joe Hayden this year isn't the Joe Hayden we've seen in the past, and we have seen Brown do well against Joe Hayden, so I'm not concerned, not bumping Brown down whatsoever. He's still, an elite level wide receiver one. Let's talk about Cecil Shorts. So far haven't gotten really anything of anything worth, anything worth anything in a fantasy perspective out of Shorts this season, but we have seen that he gets a lot of targets. And, he certainly can do well when he does see those targets. So where exactly do you have Shorts' position now, given this news, Pat? Would you have him above the wide receiver 3 tier, or are you sort of having him in that slot, somewhere in that range?
Yeah, especially until we see him produce, I wouldn't have him any higher than a wide receiver 3. It looks like it says on RotoWorld that Hearns has been demoted from the starting lineup, so you expect Shorts to kind of slide in there. If you look at Allen Robinson, with his snaps increasing, so have his targets. He's been a huge part of that offense. He may right now be the number one receiver in that offense, even with Shorts. So I would have a hard time starting Shorts as anything more than kind of a desperation wide receiver 3 at this point, with obviously some hope, for as he gets healthier and more incorporated in the offense going forward. Because he's a good player when he's healthy. So and they actually have a pretty good wide receiver group there. So definitely bullish on them for the second half of the year.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that one. A player who you probably can get pretty easily in a lot of leagues, going to be available. And these preemptive type pickups are things that ultimately win you games in November, win you games in December, hopefully win you that last game of the season. Heading back over to Twitter, we've got a desperation play. I love the desperation plays. And the desperation is between Jordan Matthews, Isaiah Crowell, and Darren Reeves. Now, I don't have any information on whether or not this is a PPR, but again, now we have two players who've shown a pretty massive ceiling so far this season, and then a player in a position where he may get some touches. But I think we're going to probably toss Reeves out of the mix there and just go between Matthews and Crowell. Pat, who are you using, Matthews or Crowell?
I am super tempted to go with Crowell because, with West being out, but I think in that game tonight with the Giants and the Eagles, Matthews is going to play quite a bit in the slot. The Giants lost Walter Thurman, their slot corner, who was a pretty good player. So I think you go with J-Matt, but it's not quite as obvious as it probably would have been even 15 minutes ago when we thought West was going to be active.
Exactly, Ross. Are you going in a different direction, or you agree with Pat?
It is a really tough one, actually. For exactly the reasons Pat said, I would probably side with Crowell. Just because I don't know. It's a close one. I've just got a gut feeling. Crowell.
Crowell. Boy, oh boy. I mean, that does get me excited, but I'm gonna break the tie. I'm going Jordan Matthews here. I do think Matthews sees his share of targets this week, and we've seen again big games out of him. And it is that one of those situations like we've seen in the past, a team like New Orleans where you don't necessarily know which player is going to have the big. You know somebody's going to have the big game, and you don't know which one, so you kind of just throw it out there and hope it sticks. Well, I would take that chance with Matthews this week because I think we could see a lot of Ben Tate touches, maybe not very many for Crowell. A question on Twitter, and this is just sort of a general question and a perfect one for you, Pat. Thoughts on Brandon LaFell this week? Obviously, 2 weeks ago we saw LaFell break out in a big way and then generally disappoint last week in a game where the Patriots' offense was doing well, really not much of LaFell. So, and despite the fact that he was basically on the field for the entire game, he played all but 10 offensive snaps. Are you buying LaFell? Are you selling LaFell? What are your general thoughts about LaFell?
I'm not too much of a fan of LaFell. I think the Pats kind of found some success last week with the two tight end offense. So they're going to limit the amount of receivers that are on the field at any one time. Edelman's going to be there all the time, and then you're kind of mixing LaFell in with Amendola. Maybe Dobson starts to come along a little bit, and now Brian Tims, who was awesome this preseason, he's a pretty big, speedy receiver who was suspended for the first 4 games. He's going to be up and running pretty soon. So it's a crowded situation. It's kind of a low volume situation as well, and LaFell's just not that good. He doesn't have great hands. He's a good blocker, but that's not going to get you many fantasy points. So if you can get anything for LaFell, A, I'd be surprised, and B, you got to run and do it. But he's not a guy who I have any shares of at all.
You bring up Tims, and I'm glad you did. I actually tweeted out about Tims. 11 catches in the preseason for 188 yards, but he of course had that big game in their first preseason game. It was technically the second week of preseason, but the first preseason game against Washington goes off. Scores a touchdown. He actually scored 2 touchdowns in the preseason. But I'm kind of, I'm really interested by this guy. But I think that maybe it'd be beneficial if we could kind of gauge how deep of a league does it have to be before you sort of preemptively stash this guy? Do you stash him in a 12-teamer, or does it have to be one of those crazy 16-team leagues? Or I get tweets from people every so often. I'm in a 32-team league. I mean, obviously in a place like that. But where's the breaking point to stash Tims, and what's your overall opinion of this guy? Is he going to have fantasy relevance this season?
I don't think he's stash worthy in a 12-team league unless you have super deep benches. Talking like 18 to 20 roster spots. I don't think he's going to be all that relevant very soon. It's a tough offense to pick up. Brady's very particular about his receivers. Like I said before, you're still dealing with Dobson. You've got LaFell and Amendola, and their best offense seems to be with 2 tight ends on the field. He's certainly exciting. So he's definitely watch him, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that's all of a sudden going to pop for 6 or 7 catches, because I don't think he'll get that target volume. So he's not going to be a guy that you need to spend a top waiver spot on. So keep an eye on it. If he starts looking like he's progressing, maybe you stash him at a later point. But for a 12-team league, I'd sit and watch.
Great insight. Another question from Chris. We're coming down the home stretch here. If you got questions, get them in now, folks, on Twitter, #WarRoom, or you can join the Hangout if you are a subscriber. Just simply go to our page, Pro Football Focus, and you'll see the link right at the top of the page. We're highlighted, and you can go into that article and get the link. Chris is asking, Carson Palmer or Brian Hoyer? A little bit of a deeper quarterback question here. Ross, who are you going with? Carson Palmer, Brian Hoyer?
I think I've got to play Hoyer. You've got to get the healthy guy. Hoyer is a guy who's massively underrated, I think. Obviously, he's had to beat up Johnny Manziel, and he's done that. I just don't think he's getting the love he deserves. An 80% fit Palmer. This guy isn't, the guy who was drafted #1 overall. His arm strength's never been the same in the last 3 or 4 years. Obviously bombed out in a few teams. I know he's decent and he's got some good receivers, but they've got issues as well right now. I think I'm going to go with Hoyer.
What about you, Pat?
Well, I mean, I completely agree that Hoyer deserves more love. He's been really good. But he's in a high run volume offense. Although he has a good matchup this week and he's played well, he's kind of a dart throw himself. So I mean, if you're going to throw a dart, I would probably throw it with a guy like Palmer who has a higher ceiling. But I kind of view these guys very similarly for this week. You're looking to like QB 15 to QB 18 range.
Yeah, that's actually exactly where I have Palmer at 18. I do have him ahead of Hoyer, and I'm going to stick to that one. Hey, I like Hoyer. Again, a lot of credit. Also, a lot of credit for Johnny Manziel for that Snickers commercial. Hilarious, but I'm going to go with Palmer because the ceiling is going to be higher. If he's out there, he's obviously healthy enough to, it's not a situation where you have a quarterback as a decoy. So,
Mhm.
certainly a QB2 this week and somebody who I'd go with. Eric's got a question. 5 minutes left in the war room this week. Michael Floyd, again, he's the player of the week. We've been talking about a bunch. Or Matt Asiata in a non-PPR league. Pat, who you going with?
I'm going to go with Floyd. I don't want a running back against the Detroit line, especially Seattle, who's going to be the passing downs back, and you don't get that PPR boost. So he doesn't have a very high ceiling. So I'm gonna go with Floyd.
Agree, disagree, Ross?
I'm just going to just say I agree. I don't think there's much to add really. Same reasoning.
News coming across. Brian Timms active in week
Ooh.
6, baby. We might get a little look at Timms. Hey, here we go. Today's the day to study. Get a glimpse of him, and if it looks like things are brewing, maybe we upgrade our expectations for him. Mike Evans also active in week 6, so if you're a Mike Evans owner, you had to like the last time we saw Evans on the field. Glennon looks his way, and there seems to be a bit of a connection between these two. Evans, we have not seen him reach his ceiling yet, so that's really an interesting guy going forward. Marquise Lee also active in week 6, again, a little bit of a confusing situation in Jacksonville, probably avoiding that one right now, but there could be some fantasy value coming out of it. Even the worst teams in the league will give us fantasy value, so you absolutely have to love that about the NFL. Got a running back question here in a half-point PPR. We're going to pick 2 running backs and some deeper names. We got Storm Johnson, who we've talked about. We haven't talked about Jeremy Hill, Anton Smith, who we have talked about, and then Zach Stacy. Oh, and I also throw in James Starks there. I think we might just probably toss him almost immediately, I think, if I'm gauging you guys correctly here. So it really comes down to, are we starting Storm Johnson, Jeremy Hill, Anton Smith, or Zach Stacy? You've got to pick 2. Who are you going with there, Pat?
Did they mention if it's standard or PPR?
Half point.
Half point. All right. So I'd eliminate Smith just based on anticipated workload. I would get Storm Johnson in there. I think he's going to get quite a bit of a run, and I'm going to stick with Stacy over Hill. It's not an easy matchup. He's dealing with Cunningham. He's dealing with Trey Watts. But I'm still going to stick with Stacy. I think we'll probably get goal line carries. Hill, I'm a big fan of. And obviously their receivers are kind of decimated. But it's not an easy matchup, and I want to see him get a non-garbage time heavy workload or heavier workload before I roll him out over a guy like Stacy. So Storm Johnson and Stacy.
Storm Johnson. Okay, now, I mean, let's be fair, though. Carolina has given up some points. They gave up a big day to Pittsburgh, decent day on the ground to Baltimore as well. And then last week, Matt Forte went nuts against them. Maybe a little bit better of a matchup than people might realize. Jeremy Hill, last time A.J. Green was out, Jeremy Hill had his best game of the season, so something to consider there. But I'm probably going to agree with you here. It's close. Ross, are you going in the same direction?
I am. I think it's a really big call to use a backup over a starter.
All right, Carson Palmer again or Matt Stafford? Really interesting question. People down on Stafford, obviously. Interesting matchup, but not having Calvin Johnson certainly hurts the cause. Is there any way you're starting Carson Palmer over Stafford, Pat?
No, not until we see that Palmer can throw it more than 35 yards. We have heard reports that he was just lobbing at 35 yards. So when you have a solid guy like Stafford, even though he doesn't have Calvin, versus a guy like Hoyer, a previous question, I think that's the way you have to go here.
Absolutely. Ross, any disagreement there?
Nope, Stafford's the play.
All right. Well, we're coming down to the home stretch here. No other significant news coming across the wire. Cordero Patterson active. I guess that's about the most significant thing that has come through. Boom bust, wide receiver 4, and that's what you're going to get out of this guy. Well, you're going to get more from us next week. We'll be back here in Week 7. I believe the great or incomparable Mike Clay, as he likes to be called, will be back with us. So, of course, enjoy the Week 6 games. Best of luck to you. Enjoy the really great Sunday night lineup here and Monday night lineup. And best of luck across the board. So for Ross Miles, Pat Thorman, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe. That's a wrap, folks.